Welcome to For the Love of Books, That Didn't Happen in the Book, a podcast by Lanarkshire Libraries.
Hello, and welcome back to That Didn't Happen in the Book. Ta-da! Yeah, I'm Andrew, and with me as ever is my sidekick. What will you call a sidekick?
Well, I'm a friend, associate, and sort of guest star every week.
Normally at this point, I come up with some kind of double act.
Yes.
But
Hail and
I've
pace.
kind of run out at the moment. I can't think of anything, that springs to mind.
What other double acts are there throughout history? Laurel and Hardy.
Yes. No, nothing else.
No, I can't think of anything either.
So, yeah, let's go down a different route. He's the cheese to my biscuits.
Yeah.
He's the Marmite to my sandwich.
I have never had Marmite.
No. He is my special guest. He is Mr. Cullen. Say
Hello, everyone. Welcome back.
So, this is kind of your choice this month.
Yes, so I thought it would be interesting, given the previous episodes, to go in a different direction. So this episode, I have chosen Twilight by Stephanie Meyer.
A classic.
Well, yes. And this is the thing. So I think it's easy to forget how big Twilight was. Twilight was a huge phenomenon for a while.
Yeah.
However, looking back, sometimes I wonder why. Why was it so successful? I sometimes obsess over these things, Andrew. I wonder, why was it a hit? What was it that appealed to people? And say, other books around the time didn't appeal to people. And the reason I obsessed over this was because at the time, and a lot of people might not know this, before I wrote contemporary adult fiction, Scottish fiction, I wrote some very odd, strange, quirky young adult books.
Yes, you did.
And at the time, if you know me for Happiness is Wasted on Me, you'll probably be surprised if you go on Amazon and see the other books. They're not in print anymore. And at the time, I had broken in writing young adult books. And at the time, people were like, oh, you've got to read Twilight. If you're writing young adult fiction, you've got to read Twilight. And I said, oh, what's it about? And this is how it was sold to me. I'll never forget. They said, a girl falls in love with a vampire.
Wow.
Yes. And I said, that sounds rubbish. However, I went out and bought it in Tesco. It was in Tesco. I didn't even go to Waterstones. I'd seen it before. At that point, every teen novel was a black cover with something red on the front. They even republished, Wuthering Heights with a black cover and like a red ribbon.
It was huge. It was a phenomenon.
And it changed everything, in the industry. So I read it. And basically, nothing happens. Halfway through the book, nothing happens. Towards the end of the book, they play baseball, they go on, a road trip, they run away.
Baseball with the vampires.
Yes, but nothing happens.
No.
Well, I had to know what happened in the second book. So I went out and bought the second book. So he dumps her. He ends up striking up a friendship with someone else who won't, who fancies her. Basically, it occurred to me that Bella, who's the main character of Twilight, has really bad mental health issues. He's basically been asked, to make a choice between a walking, talking dead body that glitters in the sun and a man-sized border collie who won't take no for an answer.
Because Jacob is a werewolf.
Yes.
Just to point that out.
Yes.
She's not an actual dog.
No, he's a man-sized border collie. But this is the thing. She has bad self-esteem issues where she can't just say, no, I don't want to be with you. I don't want to be with you. I am going to be a cool girl by myself. I don't need to have a boyfriend. She doesn't need to have. So that was the whole crux of the thing. But at that time, most young adult fiction, it was all love triangles. Even the Hunger Games, Peeta and I can't even remember half their names. Katniss. She had to make a choice between. Do you know what I mean? So it was kind of a thing. So the film came out because where there's a hit film.
Yeah.
Adaptation, which is what this podcast is about. So you had no idea what I was talking about when I approached you to do Twilight as the next episode.
So, I have a vague memory that I read the first book.
Listeners, Andrew's face is a picture here. He looks very lost.
I had a vague memory that I read the first book. Didn't particularly enjoy it.
Right.
I have a vague notion that I might have seen the film.
Mm-hmm.
but I couldn't really remember much about it.
Right.
It didn't. None of it grabbed me. To be honest, not for me. That's fine, and I say that as somebody who grew up with like Buffy the Vampire Slayer and
Yes,
things like that.
yes.
So it's not as if I don't like that kind of thing. And you and I are both big horror films.
Yes,
So
yes.
it's not as if it's that aspect of it I didn't like.
Did you not think, like in a library setting especially, after Twilight, or maybe before Twilight, I'm not too sure what came first, a lot of adult fiction, vampire adult fiction, is not shelved in the horror section anymore. It's shelved in general fiction. Lindsay Sands, is that her name?
Could be,
People like that, it's very mainstream. It's very sort of Sex and the City with vampires.
It's become its own genre, like, what's her name, Thean?
Yes!
Christine Thean, and people like that. The what do you call her, the Suki Stackhouse women.
Yes, Charlene Harris.
Which are all a kind of similar type thing. They're all about...
Did you watch True Blood?
I did. I watched some of True Blood.
I never really seen it.
I watched the first few series, and then again it just becomes sort of...
But if you remember, that was all the same time. That was like vampires were like in vogue for a while.
Mm-hmm. And it was all, it was cool. So, in preparation for this, I resolutely refused to read the book again.
Yes.
Because I thought, that's a part of my life I don't want to ruin again.
Yes.
So I thought, I will try and watch the film again. Having no recollection particularly of it. So I found it on streaming.
Right.
And I started to watch it. And I got probably halfway, maybe slightly more than halfway. There's a bit where they're in the forest and he shows her how he sparkles.
Yes.
Like he has to rip his shirt off.
What is that all about?
Right? I got probably just after that, and then they were sort of flying about a bit, and I went, and this was the actual chain event. I went, no. No, absolutely not. No, I can't.
It's not Salem's Lot, that for sure.
No, off, and I watched a very entertaining episode of The Hotel Inspector where Alex Blatesy tried to solve a theatre that nobody knew was there.
Right, okay, so I have watched The Hotel Inspector as well. I also watched Four in a Bed, which is a bit like The Hotel Inspector, except they inspect each other's hotels and they bully each other. No, but this is the thing about Twilight. So I will be honest, even though I'm reading literary fiction, this is how my reading cycle works. I will read a literary novel and then I will jump on to something I call a bus book or a bath book, something that's easy to read, unpretentious, and then I will jump on to maybe non-fiction and back onto a literary fiction. I can read a literary novel in non-fiction, but I can't read two fiction novels at the same time. I just don't have the capability. So at the time, I weirdly really enjoyed Twilight. I really did. If you ask me why I enjoyed those books, couldn't explain. And in hindsight, I don't actually know.
But you have to remember as well, you're talking 15 years ago, probably.
And you're trying
younger people.
Yes.
Then.
Much younger.
We were, young.
Yes.
Ish.
Yes. It was all adults who took the book out, in the library. Some kids came in. I actually remember the book with a far different cover, and it was on hardback before it was a hit. And the computer generated cover art looked nothing like how it became a brand.
Yeah.
But I think as well, the reason I don't down Twilight and I don't make fun of it too much is because there's this kind of thing, and someone pointed out to me, it was, there's a bookshop still called the Book Nook, and I'm friendly with them. I always go to the Book Nook. Their bagels are brilliant. Go to the Book Nook. You won't regret it.
This was not a paid advertisement.
No, it's not a paid advertisement.
And other restaurants are available.
Yes, I don't get my bagels for free. And she said, Kirkland, she went, things like Marvel are allowed to be taken seriously and treated with reverence because boys love it. She said, Twilight, she went, I love Twilight. Now, this is someone that runs a bookshop and she loves literary fiction, but she grew up reading Twilight. She said, why are things that girls like always treated with such disdain? I could name, say, the Babysitters Club, which was a huge thing. And it's on Netflix, isn't it? It's on Netflix, and yet people were mocking it.
I think it's a cyclical thing, though, because I always go back to when I first worked in the library, which is going back like 20 plus years.
40 years ago.
Shut up. And at the time, when you went into the junior section, it was shelves and shelves of Babysitter's Club,
Mm-hmm.
Sweet Valley High.
Yes.
These
Oh
things
my
were
goodness, I
huge.
remember.
And there was you couldn't Nancy Drew, the Hardy Boys, all these books.
The Three
shelves of
Investigators,
these
Doctor
things.
Who, I obsessed.
And then they just stopped. And now
Yeah.
you wouldn't really be able to even order one of these books in because you can't.
There was a librarian here named Agnes Valentine, and she used to organise the books into a range, like ranges, as you said. There was a Nancy Drew shelf. There was a bay of Doctor Who books. I didn't really read the Hardy Boys too much. The Free Investigators I loved. Sweet Valley High, between us listeners, the Sweet Valley High TV theme is one of my favourite ever. I'm not going to sing it because I can't, but it's such a good theme tune. I don't actually remember watching the show though, but I remember the
It's terrible.
theme tunes from the 90s were good.
It's not going live and kicking or something like that on a Saturday morning.
Oh, my goodness.
So it was the kind of thing, and that was the kind of bit that, like you said, it did have quite a cool opening. And I used to maybe listen to the theme tune and then change the channel. So I didn't
But I
have
mean,
to watch
most
it.
children, when I say children's TV shows, teen TV shows back in the 90s, was it California Dreaming? Was that one of them? Oh, brilliant theme tunes.
I could do a whole episode, which unfortunately they're not based on books, but we could do a whole episode on
got to.
terrible 90s children's
Got to.
American TV
Round
shows.
the Twist, which is Australian.
Yeah.
Such a good theme tune. With Twilight, so me and my friend, like Andrew's friend as well, were like a group of friends, Claire, we went to see Twilight, the film. And I actually really enjoyed the first film. So it was directed by Catherine Hardwicke, who is a very sort of well-regarded indie director. I don't feel she's quite reached the level she deserves because I've checked IMDb and she's directing a lot of TV shows now. And I can't understand why she hasn't been allowed to do the cool indie films. But Twilight was her attempt to break through into the mainstream, possibly. And what I like about it, it's very similar to the book. There are no big changes. It's quite faithful.
That's kind of where I came at it from, because I was sitting watching it and I went, this is kind of ringing a bell, and I couldn't remember anything dramatic, and I went online and looked up what the differences were between them, trying to refresh my memory.
Yes.
But it was like, in this scene, Edward doesn't wear that colour of shirt. In that scene, so-and-so doesn't have a hat.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, that's not really any great
It's
change.
like the X-Men wearing their cartoon gear, in the film. They're not going to do it.
There doesn't seem to be any massive plot difference.
No, it's very, very faithful. What I like about the film, now, when we spoke about this earlier, you mentioned about how, what was it you said, how dark it looked, how overcast?
So there's a really weird thing where it's obviously a stylistic thing that she decided to do, and I went online and there's like rabid fan sites talking about these things, but apparently she shot the first film with a kind of blue tint.
Yes.
So, and there is scenes where you look and everything does look a bit blue, but also I can't quite explain it. It's as if it's like overexposed almost. It's too bright. Scenes are too bright. They're not. There's no naturalistic lighting. It's not like you're going, oh yeah, they could be walking down the street. You're aware that people's faces are just so white and pale, and
you can't understand why no one notices like this weird looking family walking into a cafeteria.
It looks so weird.
Yes.
And it's not as if and
the dad works in the hospital.
If somebody walked into my library looking like Edward Cullen, right?
Me next week.
With that makeup and that whatever, I would instantly go on the phone and go, Fiona, I think we've got a vampire in the library.
I mean, they could get away with it in Cumbernauld. It's never sunny here.
They're not even, it's not even as if you could say they're passing.
No.
As normal people.
As human beings.
They're clearly not.
So when I first saw the film, I assumed that it was, as you said, a stylistic choice because vampires living in one of the most overcast areas in America, they can exist during the daytime and it's not so bright that their secret is exposed. All this made sense to me. I was actually fine with the interior logic of the Twilight universe because I don't tend to watch something and critique it along the way. I tend to try and watch something and just enjoy it for what it is rather than what I want it to be. However, it's afterwards that I start to think about it. And that includes the book.
So this confused me.
Right.
Because vampire lore, as it is, dictates that if they go into sunlight, they die.
Yes.
But that doesn't happen in Twilight.
No.
He goes out and he sparkles, and that's why they can't go in the sunlight.
Like a unicorn.
Some load of old toot.
Yes.
But why don't they die? Is there any explanation that you can remember?
No.
It's just so every other vampire story is wrong.
Yes,
It's what we're saying.
but this is something that I did appreciate about Twilight was that she actually took very familiar vampire lore and she did something different with it. She tried to recreate it in her own image, in a sense.
Yeah.
It makes it a bit more friendly. There was a book, so listeners at home, if you can track this book down, it's called The Silver Kiss. It was published a few years before Twilight, and it's a bit more of a traditional vampire story where a girl and a vampire fall in love. He's a teen vampire, nowhere near as old as Edward, which is what we'll get to. And it's so beautifully written, poetic. And she wrote another book called Blood and Chocolate, which I'm laughing because it was turned into a film. It was the worst film I've ever seen. It was so bad.
Well, boys and girls, I feel this is a proud contender
Yes.
for a future edition.
Blood and Chocolate was such a good book, and that was about werewolves, whereas The Silver Kiss was about vampires. And The Silver Kiss has this bleak finality to it. Like the last scene is so beautiful, and it's dark and it's depressing, but you read it because it's so beautifully written. And Twilight has similar themes, but it's nowhere near as good as The Silver Kiss. And yet, going back to what I said earlier, why didn't Silver Kiss cross over the way Twilight did? And I'll tell you why, because it isn't teen friendly. It's depressing. People die in it.
Yeah.
People cry. People are depressed. They have their feelings.
I think at its heart, I think Twilight works for that audience because it is a romance.
Yes.
The vampire side of it, although it's
It's a love story.
it's
It's
a
like
love
Romeo and
story.
Juliet.
and that's, we can dress things up however we like, but in the end, even now we speak about this a lot.
Yeah.
A lot of young adult fiction today is LGBT plus,
Oh yeah, it's
friendly.
very friendly now, whereas it wasn't back then.
and there's lots of girls now they're loving reading the gay books.
It's funny how a lot of the audience that borrow the books are teen girls.
Yes. And now Heartstopper,
Yes,
which
it's
is
all
a
teen girls that have been coming in to get it. That and manga. Anime, manga's the other thing.
I think of myself as a man of the world, and I have no prejudices, particularly when it comes to watching things, and I just watch things as they are. And when I heard like the premise of Heartstopper and what it was going to be, and I thought, wow, that sounds like it's going to be, really kind of groundbreaking.
Yes.
And and it's something, wow. And
See, I never read it. I don't know anything about
I
it.
haven't read it, but I thought when the
I've
TV
never
shows come out,
watched
I
it.
thought,
It's just-
wow, this sounds like I might like this.
Mhm.
It's just not very good.
Oh,
And it's
really?
No, it's not mad. It's just, I just find it all very, meh.
It's funny because, I'm at an age now where back when I was writing young adult fiction, I was trying to be punk and do these outrageous, crazy teen books. But at the same time, I grew up watching Heathers. I'd like the same films you enjoy.
Yeah.
The Craft is still one of my favourite films, but certain things I'm not interested in anymore. I'm too old to watch.
No, well, that's it.
Hollyoaks, do you know what I mean?
And so I watched the first series of Heartstopper and thought, nah, I get what this is. I get, again, the way that I feel about the smash hit musical Hamilton. I appreciate why people like it. It's just not for me.
Yes.
And
Twilight was the same.
it was a bit like that. And I think it's good that all these things are out there, that people can,
They can
latch
gravitate
onto.
towards something they love.
Not on the surface, something like Twilight and something like Heartstopper, you say, well, they're completely diametrically opposed,
Yeah.
but they're not, because they're love stories
Yes.
about outsiders,
Yeah.
in a way.
Oh my goodness, right, okay.
So there you go. That was like a light bulb. You should have seen his face there.
No, because like I said, I know
Oh.
very little about Heartstopper.
So-
I
so-
thought it was like someone died and came back to life.
It's about two boys that fall in love at high school,
All right, okay.
effectively.
And they don't, they get to just be in love, and there's
They
no
get to
like
be in love.
controversy.
Nobody cares.
Because at Commonwealth High School, that would not have happened.
But we grew up in the era of Section 28,
Yes.
where nothing was allowed to be spoken
No.
about or anything like that anyway. So,
I mean, thank God the Ricky Lake show was on.
yeah, but it wasn't that environment. So to sit and watch something, and maybe that's why I can't identify with it. There's a scene in one of the first episodes where they're sitting and there's I think it's like two girls talking. I can't quite remember. But one of them says to the other one, yeah, so did you tell them that you were bi? Yeah. And it was a whole conversation about that, as if they were saying, did you have chips for your tea? And
I
it's
love
so
chips from tea
removed
right now.
from what we grew up
Yes.
in that era. But
we identified with Heathers more, where they were like bullying each other wearing colour coordinated clothes.
but is that, you know, regardless of it all, it's still a love story. And I think deep down, most young adult fiction, however
The
it's
most
dressed
successful ones are love stories.
They are, you know, somebody that doesn't fit in meets somebody else and they fall in
Yeah.
love. And that's, you can dress it up with vampires, werewolves, whatever else.
I think that's where I went
it's
wrong
the same
though, because
basic concept.
when I was writing young adult fiction, I deliberately veered away from that because I refused to have love stories in my books.
Yeah.
All my books were full of like
Yes.
viciousness and unpleasantness and
Yes.
murder and explosions and unicorns.
So you said something earlier on about your young adult fiction or your teen
Yes,
fiction
yes.
being out of print.
Yes.
Yes. You can't buy them anymore.
I don't think so. They are out of print. The publisher's no longer around. But then by that point,
Moving on.
I had moved on and I'd written Happiness is Wasted on Me. I always wanted to write cult fiction. I always wanted to write contemporary Scottish fiction.
Yeah.
It's where my heart lies. It's what I read. And at the time, I was writing young adult fiction because that's what got published first. Conjuring the Infinite got picked up first. So it wasn't, I had like an affinity towards some of it. Some of the books I read growing up, Point Horror and Nancy Drew and stuff like that. But it all felt a bit middle class to me. So that was my perspective. Twilight, I enjoyed at the time, but a lot of adults read it as well at the time. So there's a lot to be said for young adult fiction not really being read by teenagers. It was read by a lot of adults. It got to the point where they had shows at the Edinburgh Book Festival. It was attended by adults for teen books.
There's an argument now, and I think we spoke about this in the library a while ago, that there's so much crossover now that whether we need a new category for these books rather than categorising them as young adult fiction.
Well, back in the day, they were called juvenile.
Yeah.
When I was a kid, they were known as juvenile fiction, and then it became young adult. And then, like, classifications in libraries obviously are important because we need to know what we're shelving. So there's junior fiction, there's junior young fiction, there's young adult fiction. I don't know for sure, but I don't think the young adult fiction goes out as much as it used to.
And I think that this is where it falls down, because I think a lot of that stuff, if it was shelved more in the adult section, I think, like you said, there's a lot of crossover. I think a lot of adults would take them out. They won't go to that section because they think it's for kids.
Yeah.
But if those books were on their shelves, they would pick them up. They would take them. So
it's funny, but every now and then something comes along and it blows the doors open the publishing industry, and then that influences everything else. So for a long time, when I'd written a book and had sent it to my agent, had sent it to a publisher, and they got back to the agent and said, we like this, but we would like the main character to be more relatable, like Bella from Twilight.
Who is, I have to interject at this point, is not remotely relatable for reasons that we'll get into shortly.
But by that point, I was gunnered with young adult fiction. So like, I need to write the adult fiction that's in my heart. But this is the thing. So Twilight, I reread it recently. And again, I hadn't noticed at the time. How can you not notice? Nothing really happens in the book. Then you've also got this weird thing that people pointed out with Buffy and Angel. Edward is hundreds of years older than Bella. They're at school together, but he's trapped in a teen's body and he's got to... Like they keep going back to high school, that family, and they keep repeating their high school experience. Why would you want to?
Just nobody realise.
I have no clue.
It's just occurred to me.
Why would you want to go back to Cumbernauld High School?
School in America is like 4 years.
Yes.
Right? Because they've got junior high as well. So you go to high school, you do 4 years, you graduate. Like if you're Edward Cullen.
Yeah.
You graduate after your 4 years. And then
you go back again.
What, like immediately? Would the headmaster not be going after like 5 rounds of this? Would they not be saying, wait a minute, I think we have to call the school board?
Like,
you're a 900.
The weird, ancient, graduated.
So do you think that, I know we're going down a complete rabbit hole here, but do you think they do 4 years and then what do they do after? They can't go straight back to high school.
Do they do work experience?
That doesn't make sense. They can't say,
they
can't graduate in, let's say, June or July.
No.
And go back to school as a freshman It's September.
It's bizarre.
And everybody just pretends, unless they're like, what's that thing that used to do in Buffy, where they like hypnotised you, like glamoured you?
Yes.
Unless that's what it is, the town are all hypnotised into not realising that these people have already done high school 27 times.
No, my theory is they all know they're vampires.
You
You
think
must know
so?
But this is the other thing. Bella, so he falls in love with Bella, and she has a fascination with him and his apple. So he can't read her mind. So the basis of his fascination with her,
of course.
they've all got powers. They can't just glitter. They've got to have like special powers. So the basis of his fascination with
I
her,
can read everyone's minds.
except yours.
Yours. At that point, that was not long
Yes.
before I turned it off.
Robert Pattinson, and they're very good in their roles.
Well, I don't accept that.
Oh no, and listen, they've taken something ridiculous and made it semi-believable, I feel. And they've gone on to have some credible careers.
Yes, but
He's Batman.
right, but listen. So I sat and watched that last night, right? Okay. And I sat there the whole way thinking,
You look Scottish.
it's the performances are so flat.
No.
Yes,
I want to watch
They
it.
are so flat. What do you call her? Bella, Kristen Stewart.
Yes.
Sport through the whole film.
I think she looks like a teenager.
She's just like a flat,
That was
boring, and Edward is just
No, wait, that wasn't
sinister.
me, I'm not bored.
They're just the only person who looks as if she's getting spark. Like Anna Kendrick pops up,
Yes.
playing like a classmate.
Bella.
She's the only one that doesn't look like she's wants to fall asleep.
So my favourite scene in it is where Edward takes Bella to meet his family. They try and cook her food. They make her a casserole. And she's the only one that can eat it. Can you imagine sitting in the house eating the food and they're all crowded around you just watching you?
There's where they go into his bedroom and she goes,
Oh, it's
"Just have a bed." And she says something like, "Where's your bed?" And he says, "Oh, I don't." She said, "David, you don't sleep?" And he goes, "No, not ever."
And he doesn't have bags under his eyes.
It's just, I'm sorry. I mean, I know you're trying to defend it here.
Yes,
And
I'm doing it on behalf of the millennials.
I'm not mocking it for in
Yes.
the sense that it, I want to be horrible.
Yes.
But the film is not. It's not a particularly gripping film.
Well, listen.
Like you said, nothing happens.
Nothing happens, but listen, the sequels. So Catherine Hardwicke, who I felt done quite a good job, and she made something that could have been ridiculous feel real.
Right. And then
She never
got
got to.
fired,
Well, I'm not sure what happened, but she never got to make the other films because, from what I read, she needed time to prepare for the next film. She would have done them all. However,
because it was going to take a long time to
Yes.
get a decent performance
Well,
out of half of them.
and I get why the movie studio did this. They were like, nope, absolutely not. Let's move on right away because they're supposed to not
They want to
age.
make money.
They're supposed to not age. Like Angel, by season 7 of Angel, was like a middle-aged man.
Yeah.
He was not an Irish
I
scamp.
watched the first season of Buffy recently, and when Angel came on for the first time, I kind of went, "Oh my goodness,
Yes.
he's like a child."
Yes, he's very young.
Yeah.
And by the end, he is. I'm not going to.
he's
Yes,
not.
I'm not
Yeah.
incurring the wrath of the Buffy fans or Lindsay who
By
might be
that
listening.
point, it's like 11 years later, and
Yes.
neither of us are
No,
in
of
the
course
same
not.
shape.
Of course not. But this is so. They made the films, and me and Claire went to see all the films because by that point we committed to it. We're like, oh, let's go and see the next Twilight. So the second film, there are werewolves, computer-generated CGI werewolves.
Now, am I right in saying that Jacob, when he becomes a werewolf, cuts his hair? Is that how they know that he's become a werewolf? He cuts his hair and he gets a tattoo.
And he
And
gets
then-
bigger.
He bulks
he's
up.
very
of
bulked
course.
up.
Yeah.
And they also talk telepathically, like the werewolves.
Oh.
So you have these scenes where the werewolves just look at each other with their CGI eyes, and you hear their voices. No, Bella, we must defend. That's kind of like. And me and Claire were like watching. I was eating my nachos and my hot dogs when I still ate red meat and pork. I'm quasi-vegetarian now.
A hot dog maybe once a year.
Yes, once a year.
Yeah.
But it's like when I go and see a Poirot film or something, but mostly it's just chicken and fish. So we're watching
And
it.
a hot dog's really just like sawdust, so it doesn't even really
That's
count.
how I justify it to myself, but mostly it's nachos at the cinema. So we're watching it, I'm just like, what on earth is going on? And then by the time we get to the last film, which by the way was split in two, the final book was split in two, so they have two films. So we watched it at the cinema in Byres Road in the West End. We went there for the last Twilight film. I'll never forget this. And Jacob falls in love with Bella's baby.
Yes. I mean, I've read up on what happens, but I couldn't bear to read or watch
I sat there like, what on earth is going on? This is like twisted now.
Right, so let me see if I've got the logic of this, or the sequence
The
of this
logic?
correct, right? So, at the end of the first Twilight, and this is where I have an issue with everything. At the end of the first Twilight, she wants him to make her a vampire.
Yes.
Now, I just find that so bizarre, and speechless. So she wants him to make her a vampire. He says he won't do it until they're married.
I mean, what is going on?
So they get married, and then and they have intimate relations.
Yes.
And immediately she falls pregnant.
With a
straight
baby
away,
that talks.
with a baby that's like
Look who's talking.
Elizabeth Maxwell out of V.
Oh no.
And she ages at an astonishing rate, doesn't
it's
she?
scary.
And she has the baby in
And Jacob
no time at all.
falls in love.
Jacob falls in love with the baby.
It is,
But it's not like a kind of creepy thing, because she has like Elizabeth, she grows to a teenager.
That's what we're
very
told,
quickly.
but it's extremely creepy. And in the cinema, I will never forget this. In the cinema, we're watching it in horror, and I'm like, what is going on here? Because this is just very strange. I knew the book, it was just creepy enough, but seeing it on screen made it even worse. And at the very end, so there's a big fight sequence at the end, which isn't in the book. From what I remember, because I've not read the book in years since it first published, there's a big fight sequence, and we're all watching it in the cinema, and then it cuts away to one of the Cullens who can see the future. And she says, that's what's going to happen if you get into a fight with us. So the fight sequence didn't happen. It's literally a vision we've just watched the last 10 minutes.
Pam Ewing's dream.
So someone in the audience screamed and flung their popcorn at the screen. It wasn't me, by the way. I did that during the Blair Witch Project, but I didn't do it during Twilight. We fled that cinema like a bomb threat had been called in. We just fled it and ran down the street. We're like, this is the worst experience we've ever had. The worst film. I will maintain that the first Twilight, despite the creepy, problematic stuff, because I didn't think about it. I was, at the age where you don't think too deeply about trash. I was watching it and I thought, it's a love story. It is deeply problematic in so many ways. Someone told me it was an allegory for Mormonism.
Well.
Yes.
Well.
Abstinence in Mormonism, or Disney even. Someone said that as well. It was a very sort of Disneyfied, like the Jonas Brothers wearing special rings that defended them from girls.
Well.
Like the ring had a perimeter barrier that stopped people coming near them.
I mean, it didn't, but that's...
Can you imagine an electroshock punishment?
I mean, that's 100% didn't, but that's what they like to tell people.
Yes.
I don't know. Part of me says, would I like to go and watch the rest of the films just to see how the story develops?
No.
I feel, having read the Wikipedia synopsis for the rest of them, I don't feel my opinion would change a whole lot. I don't know that it's worth me investing another 8 hours of my life, possibly more.
No. It's melodrama, but nothing really happens. And the whole idea of just creepy vampires and teen girls, and I don't know, it is very, very disturbing now in hindsight. But it's stuff we didn't think about with Buffy, or maybe people did, and because we were teens, we just didn't think about it.
But then times change, and there's lots of things when you watch them now that you don't. I mean, we were talking.
Veronica Mars, she's dating the sheriff's deputy.
Well, and we were watching The Swarm the other week, where the bees.
Another disaster film, which Andrew insisted.
Which I will mention shortly. Where the bees were bees from Africa.
Yes.
And remember, this was a film made in the 70s. And the second half of the film consists of lots of scenes of actors shouting at each other. The Africans are coming. The Africans are coming.
Oh my goodness.
Now, it's so, at the time, probably they didn't think anything of it.
No.
It's so racist.
It's so bad.
Really bad now.
And that's not...
Times change.
The train exploding.
Don't waste it for everyone everybody.
sorry, yes. I mean,
we're going to urge them to seek it out the shelves
Yes.
for the sheer.
Claire, our friend Claire, was either very tired or very hungover.
Yes.
But she couldn't believe half the things that she said in that film.
No. Yeah.
That was
But,
very strange.
Yeah. I'll mention that in a second.
In a different way from Twilight.
Yeah. But so, wrapping up Twilight.
Yes.
Your thoughts at a
I was fascinated
safe
by
distance.
the phenomenon.
uh-huh.
I was fascinated by the phenomenon, and it was a phenomenon.
It was, yeah.
Everybody was reading that book for a while, mostly everybody. But at the same time, a lot of the trash that I do like, I'm not putting it down, because like I said earlier, teen girls should have their own thing as well that shouldn't be mocked, just because it's not something that teen boys can read.
Yeah.
I'm fascinated by it, and I do actually understand why it was so big. But also, I don't understand. Sometimes I think about it, I'm like, why? How? How did that cross over in The Silver Kiss? Didn't.
Do you think that teens of who the target audience were, picking it up for the first time now, would go, oh wow, this is incredible, I love it? Or do you think they would go, this is the most cringy book?
I think they would pick up on a lot of the problematic elements in it, but I actually do think if it was still published all over again, it would probably be a hit. Because certain things that were big phenomenons, you look back on it and you don't understand.
No.
You don't see what was so big, like the Bay City Rollers. What was that all about? On a random tangent, I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
Then their influence was massive. You know,
Yeah.
like the Ramones basically copied some of their songs, and the Ramones helped invent punk. Some things inspire and influence later generations. I don't really see Twilight doing that. I don't see it inspiring or influencing other people. I don't see anything coming out afterwards that would,
It's interesting.
apart from the initial wave, like the Vampire Diaries, which was pre-Twilight.
But there
obviously.
is still, I guess, there's still certain things that probably would connect. I just don't know whether it's exciting enough now.
Yeah.
Maybe the book you could get away with because you put your own spin on a book when you read it.
Yes.
But I think the film, looking at it from my point of view last night, rewatching it, and how I think people who watch it for the first time would maybe react. I don't know that it would be something that they would go, I have to go back and watch this 355 times.
It's not The Craft. I mean, you don't.
so.
Nothing really happens in it.
No.
It's got no real substance in a lot of ways. But do you know what? There's nothing wrong with that. Some things don't need to have substance, and you can sort of like read it. It's only when you subject it to a deeper analysis that you start to see it jumps out at you. I mean, it jumped out anyway.
And it does have a lineage to stuff now. Those books that are out at the moment, which are popular, which is I forget the name, A Court of whatever they're called.
Oh
Court of
yes.
Thorn and Roses.
Are you
Sarah
talking about
Maas.
Sarah J. Maas?
Yeah.
TikTok.
And I have read
crazy
the
for
first
Twilight
one of
back
those.
then.
And there is a similarity. She falls in love with somebody and he's a bit
Are they
mysterious and
adult or young adult?
well, this is a
Crossover,
thing. They are sort of crossover, but this came up recently in another library that I work in, where they're categorised as teen fiction.
Yes.
Some of it is quite sexual,
Oh really?
and there was a concern that they were too graphic for teenagers to read.
Yes.
Because teenagers, there's a big difference in life experiences from 13 to 19?
Right now as well, there's a real push against teen fiction, especially in America. There's a lot of censorship going on.
So,
and there was like people picketing libraries, even here in Scotland. I passed a library recently, and there was people picketing.
So I suppose Twilight's quite chaste in a way.
Oh, it's
when you look at it
extremely, but that was the
You know,
point.
it's, wait till you're married and then we'll, we'll do the deed.
I wonder what Ricky Lake would say about that.
I know, Ricky Lake.
Right, that's me. I'm going to go off now and I'm going to listen to the Sweet Valley High theme tune.
A couple of quick things to mention before we finish up. First of all, I don't think we've really decided what we're going to do next month.
No.
We had spoke about breakfast at Tiffany's.
Yes.
To maybe go down that route.
And Jaws. You thought about Jaws.
So let's say it'll be one of those.
Yes.
We've got a few extra things to announce today, which is exciting, sort of. So if you like what we're doing, and you would like to let us know.
Yes.
Any comments, if you just want to tell us that we're great, because obviously, that's
Yes,
the
I would
truth.
like to think so.
If you get any suggestions for books/films that we could do in the future, if you've got any interest in things that you'd like to suggest we might do, then
Or just
you
even
can
general comments.
you
We're
can
fine with that.
contact us now. We don't want rubbish comments.
We don't want hate mail. Go in the
No,
spam folder where it
we don't
belongs.
want people saying we hate you and your
You
films
mocked
suck.
Twilight.
Yeah, we don't want any of that. Don't be a troll, people. Don't
No.
be a troll. But if you would like to contact us, we have an email address. Yay! Very 1990s.
Mhm.
So neither of us are particularly social media people.
No,
For the basics, but not.
we're
not
too
lovers
busy
or
hanging out at the Bronze to care.
So it's probably easier to go this way. So if you want to contact us, you can email us on thatwasn'tinthebook@gmail.com. It is not the same name as the podcast.
Yes.
Because the name of the podcast was taken and it wanted to do, something that didn't happen in the book 93567, and I thought, no, that was rubbish.
It sounds like
And I tried to shorten it
Satan's phone
slightly,
number.
and that all was already taken as well. So so you can contact us on thatwasn'tinthebook@gmail.com. Exciting stuff.
seizes that.
And hopefully by the time you hear this, we will also have our blog up and running, which is the name of the podcast. So it's going to be at thatdidn'thappeninthebook.com. That's quite straightforward, Kippy, isn't it?
Yes, it did, and it means we can also link episodes directly, and we can get blog posts from Andrew and myself about books and films.
And it'll just be the same sort of rubbish that we talk about on here, but maybe in slightly more detail. My first post is going to be on, as we were talking about earlier on, it's going to be on disaster films. So looking at Silent Adventure, Tower Inferno, The Swarm.
It's practically a book, let's be honest.
So bit of a chat about that. I'm hoping that we'll put on suggestions that we like what we're watching, what we're reading at the time, what we're listening to, wee bits like that.
Yes.
Maybe even a quiz. Who knows? So that didn't happen in the book.com, and that wasn't in the book @gmail.com.
Talk about grand synchronicity.
So we will hopefully see you / you will hear us. That doesn't make any sense. Next month.
You won't see us, but you'll hear us.
You'll hear us, yes. And if you really want to see us, then you can look at our lovely images on our poster artwork.
Yes.
Which Kirkland has
As no
made
one
up,
has defaced yet.
which you will be able to look at on our website as well. Me with a cowboy hat on, you with a beret?
Yes.
Yeah. So, thank you for being here.
Have a nice day.
Please do not mate with a vampire.
No, especially one that glitters in the sun, or a man-sized border collie, or any border collie.
That will lead to.
Yeah.
It's all about life lessons.
Ugh.
And we will catch you again next month.
Yes.
Until then, see you later.
Read the Silver Kiss.
Yes. Bye.